Okay, so look at the translations. And again, look and see which one best conveys. The word hoariness is an old English word, if you look at the translation. Actually, I put it at the bottom. It's showing characteristics of old age, especially having grey or white hair. And Aisha Bili uses the word crown, and crown means to the top of the head, or to invest with regal power, to have a sense of regal power. So yeah, okay, scroll back down and up again. Any views on which is the best translation? Sorry? Hands up, please. Yes. Yeah, Ali is okay. Oh my Lord, infirm indeed are my bones. So it's the bones that have become are the ones that are actually weakening. So he's got the fa'il correct, i.e. the subject of the verb. And my head is filled with, and my head glistens with grey. Sorry, where am I? And the hair of my head doth glisten with grey. Okay, I don't think that's a good the best translation of وَاشْتَعَلَ الرَّأْسُ شَيْبًا. Yes.
With regards to this ayah,
Sorry? Zakaria.
Zakaria, sorry. Yes. Was it a command from Allah to have children?
No, this is a dua he's making to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not a command from Allah.
He wanted children.
He wanted children, yeah. Yes. You'd say? Palmer. Yeah, I mean, Palmer is best in terms of the washta'ala rats. When he says my head flares with hoariness, I think that's a very nice translation of washta'ala rats. Again, it doesn't give the same imagery perfectly, but it's the best one out of those six. The flaring gives the image of fire and flames, sparks coming out of the fire. And hoariness is the grey and white hair that are coming into the head. But my bones are weak. This is more a maf'ul as opposed to a fa'il. It's more an object to the verb as opposed to a subject to a verb. My bones are weak. So he's not really conveyed the sense of the bones being weak. Somebody else had their hand up? Yeah, so in summary I would say really for the whole ayah there's no one translator you can say did it the best. You'd have to mix and match to get the best flavor. Okay, we're going on. Okay, we'll skip the other examples. You can read them. Oh, you can't read them, but I'll send the notes out inshallah to the Sabeel list. The next section I want to cover is how creed or aqidah affects translation, and I want to use Muhammad Asad's translation as an example of this. As I said, Muhammad Asad was somebody who was greatly affected by modernist issues or modernist creed. So, for example, if you scroll down to the first one. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Again, we're talking about the munafiqun. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ. That when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. But when they go alone to their devils, to their shayateen, they say, إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ. قَالُوا إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ. We were with you all along. The translation of shayateen is devils, as we all know, I'm sure. Plural shaitan. He's translated it as when they find themselves alone with their evil impulses. Okay, so he's given a modernist overture to this ayah. In Surah Al-Anbiya, if you go down to chapter 21, Asad denies that Ibrahim alayhi salam was ever thrown into the fire. And that the fire was really a reference to the persecution that Ibrahim alayhi salam was facing. This is what he says in his footnotes. And to convey that, he puts his square brackets here. O fire, meaning the fire of persecution in his view, be thou cool and a source of inner peace for Abraham. So he's denying the fact that Abraham was ever literally thrown into the fire, but rather this is a fire of persecution. And that's what he's trying to convey here. He denies abrogation of verses in the Qur'an, something which Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah all agree. And so when it comes to Surah Al-Baqarah, if you scroll down a bit, when it comes to Surah Al-Baqarah, مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا نَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْهَا أَوْ مِثْلِهَا, that the translation being, we don't abrogate any verse or cause it to be forgotten, except that we bring something better than it or something like it. Asad translates it to refer to the abrogation of one message with another message. So the abrogation of Islam, abrogating the previous religions. So he translates it as any message we have annulled or consigned to oblivion, we replace it with a better or a similar one. So again, his belief is impacting on his translation. Asad has a problem in believing in the recording angels. So when we come to the verse in Surah Qaf, إِذْ يَتَلَقَّى الْمُتَلَقِّيَانِ عَنِ الْيَمِينِ وَعَنِ الشِّمَالِ قَعِيدٌ, which basically translated means when the two recorded angels are recorded, when the two recording angels are recording, seated on the right and on the left, he translates it as, and so whenever the two demands of his nature come face to face, contending from the right and from the left, the two demands of nature being the demand for goodness and the demand for badness, they're coming together and contending with each other. And other examples where his creed is affecting his translation, he denies that Isa alayhi salam ever spoke in a cradle. He points out that Khadir or Khidr and Dhul Qarnayn, they never really existed. They're all allegories. He states that Luqman was a mythical figure. He never really existed as well. So these are in his footnotes, all his modernist views are coming through. So it's a good case study for if somebody wants to read it from a purely academic point of view, just to see how creed really does severely affect translations of the Qur'an. And it's a good example also of how translation is really, at the end of the day, a tafsir. And on that note, inshallah, we'll stop this session. Sorry. Okay. Questions for 5-10 minutes, inshallah.
Questions for 5 minutes.
So, all these translations basically is like a tafsir as such. Is there any tafsir that has been translated very well into English? So we can, why do they not just translate a tafsir?
This is a very good question. Why don't they just translate the tafsir? Because I don't know. Because of course you want to translate the Qur'an itself, don't you? That's a goal, stated goal with all of these translators. They want to translate the book which we call the Qur'an. And if you translate a tafsir, we're not really translating the Qur'an anymore. But of course, the best course would be to translate a tafsir, and with of course the translation of the ayat with it, so you get both hand in hand, and that would be the best course. Unfortunately, that hasn't really been done yet. We have one complete tafsir, which is the Mukhtasar, the summary of Ibn Kathir in 10 volumes by Dar es-Salam. And unfortunately, I'm not a fan of that translation at all, because simply if you read Ibn Kathir in the Arabic and then you read that translation, you've lost Ibn Kathir. Really, it's just such a summary, and also the translation isn't really brilliant anyway.
You're losing it again.
You're losing it again in translation, yeah. There was Aisha Bewley again is working on the translation of Qurtubi, and the first volume I think she's done, but I've not seen it, so I don't know how good it is. Yes.
Is there a case that a translator can have take some liberties that some metaphors in Arabic don't have the same impact in English?
Is there a case where a translator can take liberties because in some structures of the Arabic language and some stylistic features of the Arabic language and some of the images used by the Arabic Qur'an don't translate well into other languages, because you have to understand the culture behind the language to understand those. So can the translator take liberties in those? Allahu Alam, it seems that they have done so in their translations. But the best thing to do would be to take such liberties and put footnotes explaining that you've done that. And then you cover both things. One thing that I want to emphasize after all this is that even though we're saying that a translation can never truly convey the Qur'an, or we cannot convey the Qur'an, we cannot translate the Qur'an, what the translations, all translations do, and one of the miracles of the Qur'an is that no matter what language you translate it in, the message, the essential message of the Qur'an is preserved in that language.